The rewilding idea, which has come out of concern about climate change and everything else, is something I find quite fascinating. And it's important to understand that rewilding does not mean a return to the original state. It means a restoration of balance. So if you've got a formal garden, you need a wildflower garden for genetic variety and things like that. So when we come to the Agile movement, and a lot of our work is within Agile, it's my own background. I was one of the three, as director, I was one of the three companies that set up the DSDM consortium, which was one of the three feeds into Agile and so on. So I've been around this for a long period of time. And at the moment, you can quite clearly see Agile is entering the commoditization phase. You've got lots of highly codified, highly structured approaches. You've got certification schemes. You've got religious wars of people fighting about whose method is the best and everything like that. And it's lost a lot of that original energy which came from Snowbird, which came from DSDM, which came from the original Scrum as you go through that, and came from Kent Beck's work in XR and so on. So all of this stuff is really interesting, and we started to look at how can we restore some balance to this. So recognize where we are and recognize that we can't go back, but we actually need to rethink it a bit. Now the Cynefin framework allows us to do this. So if we look at Cynefin, we can actually see that in the order domain, there's no problem with techniques like waterfall. So waterfall techniques, Prince2, even PBOK and so like, all have huge value where you actually know exactly what you want to achieve, and you know the resources you want to achieve it, and you know there are root causes because you've got this structured relationship between cause and effect. Large government projects, all of these sort of areas, you can have a highly structured approach. There's no reason to adopt an Agile methodology overall. And there are political dangers here. I remember working with one group of Australian engineers, and they were doing telecoms infrastructure, which is classic waterfall in terms of what you need to do. But nobody got promoted unless they were on the Agile fandom type thing, so they created one-year sprints. And if you know anything about Agile, you know just how absurd that is, but it allowed them to say they were being Agile, and they were being canny, to use that Scots word. So if we look at Cynefin, we can say within order there are valuable things that we can do there. And then we can start to look at other domains. So if we look at the liminal domain between complex and complicated, that's where techniques like Scrum and to a lesser degree Kanban all sit really well. Because they're taking a half-formed idea and they're going through very fast iterative cycles in order to produce an outcome which gives predictability, or a constructor, if I want to go to constructor theory, something which will produce a replicable outcome, and that's one thing software does really well. Because it's a linear iteration, it's not truly complex, but it's in that complex becoming complicated, and that's its value. So that's how we can start to use Cynefin to petition different methods. And then we can start to add new methods to that. So I'll go through a few of these. One of the things that we focused on heavily in DSDM was the concept of a time box. And the way a time box works is you say, I will deliver on the 1st of October 2022. And you have a minimum and a maximum range of functionality and a minimum and maximum level of resource. So you're allowed to vary within that, but at the very least, you have to deliver the minimum functionality for the maximum resource on the date. Now that approach is really useful in large projects because dates are the key dependency between product components. It gives people flexibility, they can self-organize, it runs over longer timescales, and time boxes are effectively very valuable. We then move into more truly complex techniques, and let's give 2 or 3 examples of those. One of the things we work on is the use of trios as an alternative to systems analysts, because remember in the complex domain, what I need is lots of parallel experiments. In any complex situation, there will be lots and lots of coherent hypotheses about what we should do, and no mechanism to resolve which is the right approach. We can only understand that by actually experimenting with all of them. These are called probes. So what we do is we take a group of 3 people. The one I normally use is somebody young, more or less fairly frequently out of college, really bright coder, can do miracles with Java code or whatever. And then somebody who's older, who's more experienced, who sees the system as a whole. So a systems architect, an end system tester. Involving testers early in the design process, by the way, is something which is really good for software development. So we pair those up. It's rather like in engagements in change in governments. we put young people together with their grandparents' generation, or in companies, we put new joiners together with people about to retire. It's called transgenerational pairing. It gives you that double perspective. And we put them in a 3 with a user who's been trained to talk to IT people. And we've been doing this for a bit, and we may make it a public course. It's a lot easier to train a user to talk to IT people than train IT people to understand users. And there's all sorts of cognitive reasons for that. So we have that as a trio, and we throw 20 trios at a problem for 2 weeks for an hour a day to come up with ideas and prototypes. And then we see what comes out of that, and we merge them, we fuse them, we develop them, we abandon them. So I'm creating that parallel experiments, and that's significantly lower cost than an analyst doing multiple interviews. It produces more diversity in the system, and it's not subject to inattentional blindness, because some of those trios will be the 17% who've seen a gorilla on an X-ray, whereas everybody else hasn't. So that's called trios. Another one, and originally developed this again in DSDM, was called TripleEight, and this was one of those things which happened as a result of an accident. So we ran what's called a JAD workshop, Joint Application Design. So we had a group of users and a group of IT people doing prototyping. And over 8 hours, we developed a series of prototypes with the IT people having discourse with users, with facilitation, and we ended up with a prototype. And I had 2 teams set up on 2 different time zones, one in Mumbai and one in San Jose. And the principle is we would hand over the complete problem to Mumbai, and then they would hand it over to San Jose and come back, because we had a very short time frame to do the design. And when I sent the stuff to Mumbai, I was tired, so I sent the prototype, but I forgot to send the original specification. And they didn't ask for it, and I didn't realize I hadn't sent it. So they basically took the output of the first process, improved it, passed it on to San Jose, again without the original requirement. They changed it, improved it, it came back the next day. And users were looking at the results and saying, God, we would never have thought of that, can we please have it? So that's called TripleEight, or force mutation. It's rather like the sort of games that children play in which somebody whispers into somebody's ear and they whisper to the next person, and they whisper to the next person, and you get something different at the end of it. And we know that stress and mutation are key to innovation, so this is an innovative process. It produces diversity you wouldn't otherwise get. And then we got the work we've done on design thinking, which is to effectively map unarticulated needs by representatives of samples of users, continuously mapping day-to-day experiences and frustrations using SenseMaker. And then we automate the production of clusters of those observations to fast prototypers who can develop things and go and say to the users, you've got this problem, would this help you? And that becomes a requirement which goes into more formal processes. So what we're able to do then is to look at a multi-method approach and a multi-vendor approach rather than a single approach in which everything fits within one structure. And we can use all of the different methods and tools with defined interactions in different ways. And that creates a resilient approach to software design, and it restores balance and integrity to the original idea of the Agile movement.